What's up, y'all? Welcome to the GridironTalkZone channel. Today, as you can see, I'm going over my power rankings for week 4. So, I've been posting these recently on Instagram and Twitter. I've liked to have been able to get them out on YouTube in a video, but I've just been posting the graphic on Twitter and Instagram because I've been very busy lately. But this week, I'm able to get out a video of the power rankings for going into week 4. So the way I do this is I update these weekly, the not predictions, the rankings based off how the teams are playing and based off how good I just think the team is. Since it's very early in the season, I'm still like counting roster talent, how I thought you were going into the season, then just how they play the season basis where they're ranked off of. But it's so early, small sample size, only 3 games. I gotta still slightly factor in how good I thought you were going into the year based off your roster. So roster talent and obviously the games are the biggest factor here. But without further ado, let's get into the power rankings. Starting off at number 32 on the power rankings, through 3 weeks, I got the Houston Texans. They were my lowest ranked team on my roster criteria evaluation going into the year. And through 3 games, they are 0-2-1. They're coming off a tough loss to the Bears through a late game pick. So the Texans, they just haven't looked the best throughout the season. They've looked competitive actually, but they haven't won, and you got to take that into account. Plus, I just don't think the roster is very good. So I got the Texans at 32. On to 31, I got the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks, they're coming off a tough week. They just played the Falcons, a game where it was a 50-50 game going in. I did pick the Falcons to win. The Falcons did win a close game, 27-23 in Seattle. The Seahawks did win week 1 versus the Broncos. Then they got blown out by San Francisco week 2. So they had a good week 1 win. But outside of that, the last 2 weeks, really, they haven't looked good at all. And they're looking like the team I thought they were going into the year. So I got the Seahawks at 31. They're down 2 from last week. On to number 30, this team was my 32 team last week, and they moved up 2 spots. Got the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons, like I just said, they beat the Seahawks, so that gets you 1 win. And still outside of that, they've been competitive the first 2 weeks, so got to give that to the credit. But outside of that, I just don't think they're a very good team. They're 1-2 right now, but let's see if they can start picking it up. I got them at 30. On to 29. This team has actually impressed me quite a bit, especially offensively early on in the year. It's the Detroit Lions. They're 1-2. They won versus the Commanders week 2. Week 1, they lost to the Eagles. And week 3, they lost to the Vikings in a close game. So they're very competitive. They look good offensively. So they got that going for them. But I think their defense is still long ways away. And I just don't think that they're any better than the teams ahead of them right now. So I got the Lions at 29. But let's see if they prove me wrong. On to 28, I got the Carolina Panthers. They got Baker Mayfield, who hasn't looked good for 3 weeks. This Panthers team, they're up 2 spots, though, because they just did beat the Saints, and they controlled the game the whole way. So that's good for them. But the first 2 weeks, they were competitive, too, with the Giants and the Browns. So that also goes to the credit. So they've looked competitive. They're a 1-win team. I think they're slightly better than the teams below them. But I think 28-29 Lions, Panthers, that's a toss-up. I just went with the Panthers right now because they just came off a win. So I got the Panthers up 2 spots at 28. Chicago Bears, they're staying put at 27, where I had them last week. They did just beat the Texans, but that's a game you expect them to win. They won it in a close game with the run game and defense and the turnovers they forced on defense. So I got the Bears at 27. On to 26, I got the Jets down 3 spots after a wild win a couple weeks ago versus the Browns. But this week, they lost to the Bengals pretty bad by 15 points. So by 2 possessions, they didn't cover the spread. So they're down 3 spots. I still like the roster talent, though, so I got them at 26. On to 25, I got the New Orleans Saints. The team is down whopping 6 spots from the previous week, where they were at 19. New Orleans just hasn't looked very good early in the year. They barely squeaked by Atlanta, and then week 2, they lost to the Bucs with some bad turnovers in the fourth quarter. Then this past week, they lost to the division opponent that I have below them in Carolina. So I feel like the Saints' resume just isn't very good at all this year. And they're a 1-2 team, so I got them at 25. So that's 32-25. On to the next set of teams. 24, I got the Arizona Cardinals. down 2 spots. They're coming off a loss versus the Rams. Game was a pretty close game score-wise, but the Rams pretty much controlled the game the whole way through. But the Cardinals, outside of that fluky, well, I'm not going to say fluky, take that back. Outside of that dominant fourth quarter with a lot of clutch plays and overtime versus the Raiders in week 2, they have not looked like a good football team. Week 1, they got blown out by the Chiefs, but it's the Chiefs. Then week 3, they lost to the Rams, and they were down big to the Raiders in that game. To their credit, they came back and won, so that still counts because they're 1-2. But this team just hasn't looked very impressive early on in the year. Hopefully, they can start to pick it up and gain some momentum so that when they get D-Hop back, they can try to make a push for the playoffs, but we're a long ways away, so we'll see how the season goes. But right now, Cardinals at 24. On to 23, I got the Washington Commanders down 5 spots after just back-to-back disappointing performances. They beat the Jags week 1, and I actually like the Commanders going into the year. I had them as my 7 seed. Still in play. We'll see if that actually happens or not, but I feel like the Commanders the last 2 weeks getting blown out by Detroit, and then this week getting blown out at home by the Eagles was just not impressive. So they haven't really impressed me at all. So let's see if they can start to get it going, though. Number 22, I got the Las Vegas Raiders. This team is 0-3. They're down 9 spots after this loss they just had to the Titans this past weekend. But the Raiders, I feel like they're more impressive than the 0-3 says. Now, they haven't been impressive, but just looking at 0-3, I feel like they're better than that record. So week 1, you lost a close one to the Chargers, mainly due to your turnovers, which still don't like to turn the ball over. That hurts your power ranking and your record. But week 2, they outplayed the Cardinals most of the game until the end. The Cardinals kind of took over, came back, and then the Raiders fumbled in overtime and ended up losing the game to the Cardinals because the Cardinals returned the fumble for a touchdown. Then week 3, Titans, you just couldn't capitalize in the red zone, really. That's what it came down to. So this team, I feel like, is not far away from being good. I feel like they still have the pieces, and I'm not predicting in these rankings, but if I'm predicting, by the end of the year, I think they're going to be higher than 22. And what they've put out on the field, they're 0-3, but what they put out on the field, I feel like looks better than 0-3. And the roster, I feel like, is definitely a better roster than 0-3 roster. So for that reason, I have them at 22. On to 21, I got the Tennessee Titans. The Titans, really not impressive through the first 2 weeks, losing to the Giants in a close one. Then you lost to the Bills last Monday night in an absolute blowout. And then this weekend, you beat the Raiders, who I have a spot below them. So that's impressive for the Titans to finally get a win on the year. They're 1-2. They're up 5 spots. See if they can continue this momentum. On to number 20, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Tough Thursday night loss to the Browns. They were in it the whole game. They just couldn't capitalize on offense. Not the best play calling in the second half. And they struggle with drops. The O-line's obviously not very good. So they're down 3 spots, but they still got a good defense. And I still like the talent on offense. It's just they got to score over 20 points. It's 2022. In the NFL, you'd like to score over 20 points. So hopefully they can pick it up offensively, but I still feel like 1-2, big win versus Cincinnati week 1. And they still are led by a good defense who hopefully can start playing like that. I know they don't have TJ Watt now, as right now, but they'll get him back at some point. But I feel like the Steelers, 20th, good spot for them right now. I feel like them and the Titans are neck and neck, but I went with the Steelers at 20. On to number 19, I got the New York Giants. This is weird because the Giants, they started 2-0. I had them 20 last week. They lost to the Cowboys on Monday Night Football this week, but they somehow moved up a spot. It's the rare scenario where you lose and you move up a spot just because look at what's happening around them is more why they moved up a spot, not because their actual play, because they didn't play good really at all, especially in the fourth quarter. But look at what's happening around them. Teams losing pushes the Giants up, even though they lost too. But Giants end up at 19. 18, I got the Patriots, another team coming off a loss. They competed with the Ravens. They just had some crucial turnovers late in the game, the fourth quarter, that really hurt them. So the Patriots going to fall 2 spots. They didn't win week 1 either versus Miami. They had a week 2 win versus the Steelers, but other than that, they're a 1-2 football team who hasn't looked super impressive early in the year. Number 17, talking about a team that has looked impressive. The Jacksonville Jaguars are at number 17. 2-1 start. They're actually second in the league, I believe, behind the Bills in point differential, coming off back-to-back blowout wins versus really good teams in the Chargers and Colts the week before, who they shut out. They're really just a close Commanders week 1 game away from being 3-0, and that would skyrocket them up this list. But they still got young talent. We'll see how they progress throughout the year, but right now they're running hot and they're moving up 8 spots for that, so they're at 17. So that's my 24 through 17. On to 16, I got the Browns up 8 spots from last week after a big primetime win versus the Steelers, in which Jacoby Brissett played really good and Nick Chubb played really good too. The Browns could just run the ball whenever they wanted. They played good enough defense against that Steelers offense to get a win, and they're up 8 spots for it. When your quarterback Brissett is looking pretty good so far, you got the run game going with Nick Chubb looking like the best running back in football through 3 weeks, and you got a defense that's playing all right, not elite, but it's playing solid. You're gonna move up on the power rankings. So I feel like they're just a team that's moving up, and they got a good rookie kicker too in Cade York. So this team is definitely growing on me over the last couple weeks. So they're moving up 8 spots to number 16. Of course, they still got Brissett playing for a while until Watson comes back, but Brissett's looking fine. So they haven't had the toughest schedule so far, but when the schedule gets tough, let's see if they can still keep winning. And they're 2-1 right now, so let's just see how the Browns progress. On number 15, I got the Cowboys up 6 spots. So Cowboys week 1, they looked so disappointing versus the Bucs. It was like, is this Cowboys team gonna even be good this year? Because Dak got hurt, and you're like, okay, they got Cooper Rush now. They got blown out with Dak. Didn't score a touchdown week 1. And then week 2, week 3, week 2, they beat the Bengals. Cooper Rush led a game-winning late drive in the fourth quarter. And then this week, they beat the Giants, who were 2-0. So the Cowboys go to 2-1, had a very good fourth quarter Monday night. So I like how the Cowboys are looking right now. The defense is looking so dominant, led by Micah Parsons. DeMarcus Lawrence is coming off a good game last Monday night versus the Giants. And Cooper Rush, he isn't playing fantastic, but he isn't playing horrible. He's just doing enough to get it done, and he's really clutching up late in the fourth quarter and just the fourth quarter overall. So I feel like the Cowboys are a team that deserves to be in the top half of this power rankings, and I got them at 15. On to number 14, I got the 49ers down 4 spots from last week, coming off of a disappointing game versus the Broncos. Low-scoring game. Broncos won the game 11-10, but the Niners, just the mistakes with Jimmy G, the fumble, the pick, the safety where he stepped out of the back of his end zone, just not looking good offensively, really, versus the Broncos. But the 49ers defense looks so dominant. They got Hufanga at safety, Nick Bosa, obviously, Fred Warner. I feel like this defense is playing very good early in the season. But I still think they're a good team, even though they're 1-2. Lost to the Bears, lost to the Broncos. They beat the Seahawks, but I really want to see them get a good win versus a good team. But I still feel like with the roster talent, and granted, it was Jimmy G's first game as a starter this year after an offseason where he didn't practice much due to an injury and just the trade rumors overall. You got to cut them a little bit of slack, but they are 1-2, so I can't have them too high on the list. But I still feel like they're better than all the teams below them, even with the 1-2 start. So I got the Niners at 14. On to 13, I got the Denver Broncos, who just beat the Niners 11-10. Broncos are 2-1, but I don't feel like they've played to that 2-1 standard. Look at week 1, they lost, scoring less than 20 points against Seattle. In Seattle, week 2, they snuck by the Texans in a close game. I believe it was 16-9. So again, less than 20 points. Then week 3, they beat the San Francisco 49ers, who I have 1 spot below them. They beat them 11-10. So this team is averaging like a bottom 3 or so points per game in football so far. Offense with Russell Wilson has looked fairly disappointing. Granted, the defense has looked fairly good, not allowing 20 points in a game yet, but they haven't played the best offenses. So overall, a team that I only think is going to improve from here, because the offense can't get any worse than it is right now. Hackett's still a very young head coach into his career 3 games in. And Wilson, they're just going to have to pick it up, and I feel like they will pick it up. So if I'm predicting, I think they're going to be higher than 13, but as of right now, they do have the 2-1 start, but they just haven't looked amazing, so I can't have them above really anyone else above them right now. So I got the Broncos at 13. On to 12, I got the Chargers, moving down 7 spots from the number 5 ranking last week. So the Chargers, they beat the Raiders week 1, big division win to open the year. Week 2, they outplayed the Chiefs for most of the game. The only difference was the Chargers did not capitalize on the opportunities for turnovers. The Chiefs capitalized on the opportunity for their turnover and returned it for a touchdown, and the Chargers lost a close game 27-24. So I was feeling really good about the Chargers last week still. I had them at 5, but after this week you lose to the Jaguars 38-10. That's not impressive, so that's going to move you down a lot. And it moved them down 7 spots. The 1 and 2, but I still feel like they have so much talent on their roster. They got an elite quarterback in Justin Herbert. This team's going to pick it up, and I'd be shocked if they were anywhere below where they are right now at the end of the year. So, Chargers at 12. On to 11, the Colts, 1-1-1. Tied with the Texans week 1. They lost shutout to the Jags week 2. That just drove the NFL crazy. They were going crazy on the Colts after losing to the Jags shutout. And then now they beat the Chiefs. Big win week 3. Close game. I believe it was 20-17. So the Colts, they move up 4 spots from last week. I love this team going into the year, and I think that they're picking it up now. And I think they're only going to keep moving up from 11, and I think they'll be in the top 10 next week or the week after. I think this team is only improving. But right now I got them at 11. They're 1-1-1. On to number 10, the Bengals. They're 1-2. This team, though, I feel like is still fairly complete offense, defensively wise. Burrow had his best game of the year last week versus the Jets after a disappointing first 2 games. The O-line is what's really hurt them. So week 1, they lost in overtime to the Steelers. Had so many chances to win it with the kicks that just didn't go the way. They got blocked, had a bad hold on one. And then last week, the week 2, they lost to the Cowboys and Cooper Rush in a game that pretty much everyone thought they were going to win. On to week 3, they beat the Jets by 15. So I feel like they're heading in the right direction now after just a rough first 2 games. And I still feel like they're a very good football team. So I got them at 10. They're up 2 spots. On to number 9, I got the Minnesota Vikings up 2 spots after a win versus the Detroit Lions. 2 big division wins this year. Packers, Lions, that's big for them. The 2-1. The other one loss was week 2, where they lost to the Eagles on Monday Night Football. They lost, I believe, 24-7, but they had so many chances to get back in that game in the whole second half. They would get the ball, get towards the red zone or in the red zone, and then they would throw a pick. So definitely don't like to see that, but they do have 2 big division wins. The 2-1, I still love the roster. I got the Vikings at number 9 in the power rankings. On to the top 8. At number 8, I got the Los Angeles Rams, up 1 spot from last week. They haven't looked amazing early in the year. They got blown out opening night to the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills are a very good team, though. Week 2, they beat the Falcons. They had control of the game the whole way through. Falcons made an almost comeback at the end, but they still won that game at home. Then this week, they just played. Who did they play this week? They played the Cardinals. They beat them. Pretty much had control the whole way through. So the Rams, they haven't looked amazing, but they still come out of the first 2 games 2-1. I still like the roster a lot. Had them at 10 preseason. Right now I have them at 8, up 1 spot from last week's ranking at 9. So the Rams, they're all right, but they're good. But I don't think they're amazing. I don't think they're as good this year as they were last year, but let's see if they can continue to progress and move up on the rankings throughout the year. At number 7, I got the Green Bay Packers, up 1 spot from last week. I feel like there's a slight gap between 7 and 8. Even though the Packers haven't looked the most impressive early in the year either. They just beat the Bucs though, but the Bucs were without their top receivers. But the game was still against a good team, good defense in Tampa Bay. I'd like to see more out of the Packers offense throughout the year as the year progresses, but I think the offense is going to continue to grow. They're just adjusting right now. Lost Devontae Adams, of course, in the offseason, but this team has a dominant run game and dominant defense. So I think you still have an elite coach and elite quarterback, so I think they're only going to continue to pick it up, and I think they're definitely a team that can be a contender in the NFC. Got them at 7. On to number 6, I got the Kansas City Chiefs, who looked really good the first 2 weeks. You beat the Chargers week 2, big division win. You beat the Cardinals. in Arizona week 1 in a blowout. But then week 3, you do lose in Indianapolis to the Colts in a close game where it felt like you had chances to win. Both teams had chances to win, and the Colts just ended up taking care of business. But the Chiefs, still a very good team, got them at 6. Definitely a team that I think can win the AFC. Don't think they will, but they could. They're down 2 spots, though, from the last week's ranking where they were at 4. On to number 5, I got the Ravens up 2 spots after a win versus the Patriots after they lost to the Dolphins in week 2. Ravens, very good roster. I expect their defense to pick it up. Their defense has been a little disappointing early, but you got Lamar Jackson playing like the MVP of football right now. And that offense has just been so impressive. So once the defense picks it up, this team's going to be really scary. So I got the Ravens at 5. Number 4, the 3-0 Miami Dolphins. They beat good teams too. Beat the Patriots, solid team week 1. Week 2, you beat a contending team in the Ravens. Week 3, you beat the Bills in Miami at home in a close one. The weird thing about this past week was the Dolphins. I believe the Bills had the ball time of possession like 40 minutes to 20 minutes for the Dolphins. Bills ran way more plays than the Dolphins. I think it was like 90 to 39. Number could be a little off, but it was somewhere around there. So it was just impressive that the Dolphins defense was able to really have Allen throw the ball over 60 times and win the game and only hold him to 19 points. That was very impressive from the Dolphins defense. Tua got hurt during the game, but he's looked good whenever he's been healthy throughout the year. And just the Waddle and Tyreek Hill combination is so deadly at receiver, that 1-2 punch. So this Dolphins team is definitely a team to look out for. But I like how they've started the year early, 3-0 against good teams. Got them at number 4 on the power rankings. On to number 3, I got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Maybe a little not as impressive as you would have thought early on, but they have been a little banged up. They did win week 1 versus the Cowboys comfortably on Sunday Night Football. Week 2, who did they play week 2? Now I'm forgetting. But they won the week 2 game. Week 3, they just lost to the Packers. First loss of the year. They lost by 2 points. Had a chance to tie it then with the 2-point conversion. Got to lay a game. Had to move the ball back and then didn't score or didn't get the 2-point. So the Buccaneers, they're 2-1. I still think they're one of the best rosters in football. Very good defense. I'm still having them at 3 because they were a little banged up last week. So that I think that definitely contributed to them losing. Now they're getting the guys back healthy, hopefully at receiver, because they had the top 3 receivers out last week. Evans suspended, Godwin, Julio still hurt. So I think that this team is only going to improve throughout the year. So I'm remembering now, the Bucs beat the Saints week 2. Defense had some big turnovers in the fourth quarter. So that's how the Bucs got the second win. So I still like the Bucs a lot. I got them at number 3, but they are down 1 from last week after a loss to Green Bay. On to number 2, I got the Bills. They were my easy number 1 last week after they blew out the Titans week 2 after blowing out the Rams week 1. And just the roster's very good. But this week, they had some guys out, so I'm not going to move them down too much, but they did lose to the Dolphins in Miami, only scoring 19 points. The only thing I'm concerned about with the Bills is I feel that they could be too Josh Allen dependent, and that could ultimately come back to bite them in the end, but I think Josh Allen is very good and still a very good receiving core. You have some running backs, hopefully one of them can break out, and you still have a good defense, so I'm not too worried about the Bills, but something to look out for. Are they too Josh Allen dependent? We'll see as the season goes on. But right now, they're still my number 2 team in football after those just fairly impressive opening 2 weeks and losing a close one to a good team in Miami. On to number 1. I think this number 1 is pretty clear for me this week. The Eagles, number 1. The Eagles just look very good early on. They just absolutely blew out the Commanders week 3. Week 2, they absolutely blew out the Vikings. Well, didn't blow them out. It was a closer game than the score said, but score-wise, they beat the Vikings by 17 on Monday Night Football. Week 1, they beat the Lions, close game, but they had control of that game the whole way through, and the Lions just scored a lot at the end. But Eagles are 3-0. Jalen Hurts is playing like one of the top quarterbacks in football just through 3 games, though. You got A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. Not quite the level of Hill and Waddle, but definitely close. And then you got a very dominant good defense. So I feel that this Eagles team is very complete. Had them at 3 going into the year. had them at 3 after 2 weeks, and now they're moving up to number 1 with the Bills and Bucks losing. So I like the Eagles a lot. And let's look over at the trending up and trending down teams real quick. You can see I got the Jags and Browns trending up with moving up 8 spots. Cowboys moving up 6 spots. So those are teams who are trending up right now. Raiders, Chargers, Saints trending down. As you can see, Raiders moved down 9 spots. Chargers moved down 7 spots. The New Orleans Saints football team moved down 6 spots. So that's the power rankings. And that's for week 4. So I'll have power rankings weekly. If they're not a video, this graphic will be posted on my Instagram and Twitter. So go follow those. But yeah, that's going to be it. Be on the lookout for our podcast sometime this week. Me and Graham will have a podcast where we're going to go over a lot of different stuff, his top 10 teams. We're going to decide if statements are overreactions or not overreactions, all of my MVP ladder. We're going to recap last week, and we're going to give our picks for the next week, week 4. So hope you guys will tune into that, and thank you for watching the Power Rankings. Have a good one.